Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monte. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for joining us today. You know, we always enjoy visiting with all of our guests on the podcast, and I know Monte was particularly excited to speak with our guest today, Will Harris at White Oak Pastures. You know, Will has been recognized all over the world as a leader in humane animal husbandry and environmental sustainability. As a fourth-generation cattleman, he and his family were raising livestock in the typical conventional method, but in the mid-1990s, Will became disenchanted with the excesses of these industrialized methods. They created a monoculture for their cattle, and as Will says, nature abhors a monoculture. So in 1995, Will made the audacious decision to return to the farming methods of his great-grandfather that he had used 130 years before. Today, we get to journey along with Will as we understand the mindset, work, and fortitude it takes to successfully implement these farming practices. It's a great conversation, so let's jump right in.
So, Will, thank you for being here today. It's awesome to see you here and spend this time together in person. We've visited briefly at some conferences in the past, Grass-Fed Exchange and such, but I feel really blessed to be able to pick your brain here for the next hour. So, looking forward to this.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Well, Will, we always like to start off with kind of folks giving us a little bit of their farm, talk about their farm, their history, and kind of how they got to where they are today. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
Sure. So my great-grandfather came here in 1866. He had a farm about 50 miles north of here in Georgia. And they lost in the Civil War. He was fortunate to have an uncle who started him over in Bluffton. He ran the farm. That was my great-grandfather. My grandfather ran the farm. My father ran it. I now run it. I've got two daughters and their spouses who are back here helping to run it. And between the two of them, they've got three grandchildren, three children who are my grandchildren. They're the sixth generation. They are 2, 4, and 6 years old. So, and as I said earlier, we've got a bunch of wonderful, wonderful people who are not family members that are very influential in managing this business.
Well, that's incredible. I know farming's a lot about a legacy, and it's great to see that you've got a legacy to continue on, both in family and in adopted family, if you will. It's true.
We all want to give our children the opportunity to come back, but not the obligation to come back. And that's what my father did for me, and that's what I try to do for my children.
Yeah, my dad was the same way. He said, if you want to, you can, but you can use my equipment to get started, but you have to get your own land to do it with. So it wasn't a handout, but it was a hand up. And I think that's a great way to get it started. And he never expected me to come, but he never discouraged me. And when I was growing up, we'd just gone through the 80s farm crisis. So almost everybody in my high school class ran as far away from agriculture as they could. And it's kind of fun to see now there's more people in FFA, 4-H, and exploring agriculture kind of coming back in. It's just, we got to make sure they're taught the right thing in school. So we'll work on that a little bit.
We have an intern program, and we bring in 7 interns 4 times a year, so 28 a year. And almost none of them are farm kids. Well, they're not kids, really. Most of them are in the 25 to 35. But almost all of them are non-farm people that have chosen this lifestyle.
That's excellent. Well, then you don't have to untrain previous ways of doing it. So sometimes as farmers, we could get in some bad habits, and that's what we always have to do because that's what we've always done. So that's fantastic. Well, tell people about your farm today that maybe have never heard of you and White Oak Pastures before. Describe a little bit about what all you got going on there. And I think people are going to be pretty amazed.
Well, I don't know about what I'm amazed, but we sure are having a lot of fun here. It's the farm is 3,200 acres. It's divided up into 112 30-ish acre paddocks. And we rotate, I guess the thing that's one of the things that's very important to us is constant movement of the animals. We pasture raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, and rabbits. And we're hand butchering them at USDA inspected plant that I built here on the farm. We pasture raise chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, ducks, and we hand butcher them in a separate facility right beside the red meat facility. USDA also inspected also. We raise certified organic vegetables and honey and pastured eggs and just a number of little ancillary businesses that on their own wouldn't be enough to make a living on, but really work well in this kind of organism. I think of the farm as being like an organism, and it's just part of that.
Well, when people talk about diversifying the farm, a lot of times you have a dairyman maybe in California to get some almonds, or you have a corn soybean producer in Illinois that puts up a hog confinement, and to call that diversity. And I think you just listed off about a dozen species there of live animals plus vegetables, all the artisan crafts, and you do your own processing. You didn't emphasize, this is amazing what you have going on here, Will, and all of the fortitude it took to get that in place, because just, working with USDA and such is quite a challenge to get those certifications for your plants.
The people I've seen move into this more land-focused, animal-focused, community-focused agriculture, the ones who have not been successful are the ones who have focused so much on the production side and gotten pretty good at that. But, you've got to be able to put it in you got to put your production in a form that's monetizable. I say that consumers don't buy cows and hogs and sheep, they buy beef and pork and lamb. And then the next step is you've got to get it to them. And for the most part, consumers don't consume what producers produce. And getting it to them is as important as producing it, is as important as processing it.
So that's an important point that you brought up there. So you talk about, you have your animals, and you also have the vegetables, you have the processing, but there's a whole nother aspect to this engine that you've built there in Bluffton, Georgia. And that's how you, I like to equate it to, Steve Jobs didn't invent the iPhone and then just expect somebody to find him and purchase it. And, they marketed what they made, and it's a marketing first. And I don't understand, as farmers, we always grow something and we complain about somebody not giving us enough for what we wanted for it, where you're taking that extra step and you sell what you grow and produce. Talk to us a little bit about your direct to consumer business.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say that I spent longer as a industrial commodity centralized producer than I've spent doing whatever this is I do now. So nothing I say is meant to be critical of anybody. And I'm not an evangelist that's trying to get anybody to change what they do. We have people that come here and we're happy to show them what we do, a lot of transparency. But I'm not trying to convince anybody to do anything different. We will tell you what our experience has been, but I'm not an evangelist. I'm not toting them little Bible tracts around. I never wanted to be in the processing business. I wanted to. I came up. This farm was a monoculture of cattle, and I ran it I went to University of Georgia, majored in animal science. I came home and I ran it as a monoculture of only cattle. And the idea of getting other species was not appealing to me, and the idea of processing was really not appealing to me. but farming differently was appealing to me. And the things I wanted to do differently, so I started doing them differently, and I enjoyed it more. But I raised my cost of production. No great surprise there. You give up the tools that science gave you to take cost out of production, you add cost back to production. So I couldn't. I enjoyed that manner of farming, but I could not afford to raise it that way and sell it into the commodity markets. Like I could not extract the extra value I put in. So we started selling beef and using local slaughter plants, abattoirs to slaughter for us. A lot of people, as a lot of people do. Nothing novel about that. And I could see that it looked like the business model might work. But my slaughterhouses, very small family-owned slaughterhouses I was using, that's all we had, ran out of capacity before I became profitable. I would call and say, I need to bring 12 this week. They say, no, you can bring 6. And I couldn't make it work on 6. I needed to sell 12. I had them raised and I needed the money. So we reluctantly went into the processing business at first with a red meat plant in 2007 and later with a poultry plant in 2010. And of course, you mentioned it being very highly regulated, and it's also very capital intensive. So of course, it was borrowed money. My dad left me with a very nice paid for farm, but I had to leverage the farm to get the money to build the plants. But we did, and we were very fortunate in the timing. The timing was very good for us, and we made it. We did not. Now let me hasten to say that I'm very proud of our business, but it is a marginally profitable business. No surprise, it's farming. It's very capital intensive, and we make money just about every year. But it's a very low return. No Harvard MBA would suggest using my business model.
But what I like is you saw the vision through that. You knew you had to get to a certain scale in order to get the profitability there. And rather than give up at where you were, only being able to bring in 6 to the local processor or something like that, you said, okay, I don't want to, but I have to get into the processing business because that's the hand I've been dealt. And you took that risk. Especially, I can't imagine what that's like, having all your farm ground paid off and borrowing against that. Sometimes if this doesn't work, you got to think to yourself, oh, am I that guy that took 5-6 generations and squandered it? And that took guts.
That crossed my mind every night about midnight.
That really helps you sleep.
Yeah, it's good for you. Yes, right. Better than NyQuil. But I should say this. It sounded good the way you said it, but there was probably more naivety in me making that decision than it was brave and bold. I never had borrowed money. I didn't realize it was how much easier it was to get it than it was to pay it back. And I made those decisions. You remember Alan Greenspan that ran the Fed talked about irrational exuberance. I had that. So I went to the bank, borrowed the money, built the plants, and at that point you're so far in, the only way out is the other side. You would be that guy that lost the farm.
So you had to make it work. There wasn't a choice, and when you have to make it work, guess what farmers do?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And again, as I mentioned, we were absolutely blessed with the timing. I sold, and then that was not skillful planning on my part, not visionary on my part. That's just when I did it. But as it worked out, I sold Whole Foods Market the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. And that was during the time that it was before the big companies learned how to greenwash commodity meat and compete with us. So we were able to sell a lot of beef during a window of time there. That was really good for us. If it hadn't been for that, I don't know what would have happened. It wouldn't have been good.
Yeah, we won't go down that rabbit trail of how they can bring them in now and process them in the U.S. and put a U.S. flag on it, but that's
but they can. But they can.
It's unfortunate, and it's and I don't know why all of our political action committee, Farm Bureau, and everybody else that we pay into supports that. But anyway, that's another topic. Sorry. So that gives a kind of a picture of what you've got going on. So you've got Whole Foods, and then I'm guessing from what I'm hearing you saying, that was a great start to the business, but still 2007, 2010, mobile phones weren't that, I don't even know if they were available in 2010. They're pretty recent. And the internet for a shopping experience, that wasn't 10 years ago a regular thing. So now your business is transitioned a lot to the direct to consumer. Talk a little bit about that, where you're at today, and how much are you working with grocery stores and wholesale versus direct to consumer, kind of what your business has evolved to.
The business has evolved dramatically. It was exclusively a wholesale business. I went from being able to only get 6, 10, maybe 12 beeves processed per week to having my own slaughter plant kind of overnight in a 12-month or so period, and needing to move 50 or 100 cattle a week.
That's a big jump.
And I'm in a very impoverished county here in Southwest Georgia, one of the poorest counties in the state. So I didn't have a local market. And that's where we were blessed. Actually, Publix Supermarket bought beef for me before Whole Foods did. But Whole Foods followed, and then Kroger, and then U.S. Foods and Cisco. And we were exclusively, purely a wholesale provider, and of beef only for a long time. Then later on, we added other species. And that's and it was probably the most profitable we've ever been, again, because of the timing. But it's really, and I'll say this: the folks at Publix and Whole Foods and Kroger, those people are good folks, and I've heard all the horror stories, but now they've always been good to me. I've shipped beef to all 3 of them every single week for years. And never had a problem, always gotten paid. Just nothing, I have nothing but good things to say. But the truth is, industrial farming and big multinational food companies and grocery and food service all evolve together. And there's a codependency there that's just evolutionary. It's just part of the DNA. All of those started post-World War II, and they came up together. And I've heard farmers say that they don't want me in there. They're trying to put me out. That's not true. That's not true. They're not trying to put us out. The fact is, we just don't fit very well. The meat coordinator from a big grocery company or food service company needs to be able to pick up the phone and say, I need 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets delivered to the following 12 warehouses. And White Oak Pastures will never have 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets to deliver. It won't happen. So what is perceived as being malicious is really, we just don't fit very well. And White Oak Pastures and the ones I mentioned, Whole Foods and Publix and Kroger, have made it work for a long time. But if I were showing up there today, I probably couldn't get in. but I have nothing negative to say about them. But to fast forward, the online, I guess Amazon, they didn't invent it, but they certainly made it, brought it to the party, online shopping, online purchasing. And we went into that business in a very, we actually do the order fulfillment here on the farm in a metal building with some 40-foot coolers in there that we put together. But we did go in that business. And about, what would that be? 10% of our business was online, which is not a lot. When the pandemic panic happened a year ago, it just exploded, and we couldn't keep up with it, and of course missed a tremendous amount of sales. But we stepped up all we could, and when it leveled out, which was, I think March is when it really exploded and leveled out by about June or so, our volume was at twice what it was before. It's still not enough for us to make our living on, but it's twice what it was. So it must be, what percent would that be?
It'd probably be 20% of your mix now.
About 25% of the mix now.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, it was an opportunity to gain new customers. That, in our little business, we went 5x, 7x for a few months, then settled out 2 to 3x ever since. Same
numbers.
It's been great. I mean, it's some were just panic and some were looking for an alternative. So that's great.
We're taking a short break to share that the AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by the team at Ag Solutions Network. Rooted in innovation, ASN is committed to leaving the land better than we found it, not simply maintaining it. We're here to help you navigate the balancing act of productivity and building a legacy. From practices to products, ASN is more than a new jug. It's a new way of thinking. So don't be afraid to be different. Be afraid to be the same. Contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm. And now back to our show.
So talk to me about, a lot of change in the last 10 years you've just described, and folks might want to re-listen to that, but talk to me about White Oak Pastures of tomorrow. What's your vision for the farm and where you're going to be? What do you see? And well, I'm sure there's several things we'll look back and think, boy, that was off, but you always got to be looking to the future. What do you see in the next 5-10 years for you, your farm, and your family?
Well, I've never, I told you my degree's in animal science, and I was raised cowboy, and there's never been a business plan here, never been a whole lot of forward projections, but there are directions, and we certainly are put in positions where we have to make decisions. And, so we continue to add land. My red meat plant is maxed out. Poultry is not, but I don't plan to expand either plant. When we grow to what we've got, that's where we'll cap it off on that side of it. We continue to add land because we can handle more of our own animals. We currently use a producer group, and I like raising them all myself, and I think I can get there here pretty quick. I like the idea of a single estate product. That just sounds good to me. And I like having that kind of control. And so and I think that non-irrigated land in my market is underpriced. I think irrigated land is probably overpriced. So I think that, of course, we all know that land it doesn't cash flow. It's never cash flowed. But I think that buying as much undervalued non-irrigated land as I can and putting it in my business model is the greatest wealth builder available for my family at this point in this generation. So we'll do as much of that as we can afford to, although it's limited. Cash flow is just not there to do a lot of it. Direction. So I'll tell you this. Today we have lodging on the farm. We got a number of cabins. We got a restaurant serves 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We got a store. I just put in an RV park. we got, we're doing more and more of that. They call it agritourism, and that's fine. I just call it sort of fixing for company. None of it is, and none of that stuff is profitable. Most of it is increasingly profitable, so we're not hemorrhaging anymore. But it's not losing more than we can afford to lose, and I believe it might be break even one day. I don't ever see it as being really profitable. But I'm glad I went in it, because people would come to see us and say, I buy your products at Whole Foods every week. We just want to come see how you do it. And we weren't equipped to show them around. I was moving cows. Somebody was running the packing plant. Somebody was keeping the books. Nobody. And we gracious Southerners, we wanted to be gracious, but we had to gear up and equip to do it, and we did, and I'm glad we did. Even though it's not a money maker, I'm glad we did that. That was the right thing to do. So we put in the store and all those other things. Similarly, we have a fairly inundated with people that would say, hey, I want to come there and work and learn, and I'll work for free. You don't have to pay me, but this is what I can do and when I can do it. And, we got 180 employees. And I can't have folks coming in, and people justifiably, if they say I'm gonna work for you for free, they think they can do what they want to do when they want to do it. But then I can't run my business, with my 180 people I love, and somebody will say, no, I ain't gonna do that. So we set up an intern program. And it too is break even, but I'm really glad we did it. I mean, we've hired a bunch of those people and met a lot of great people, and I'm glad we did it. Fast forward to now, you asked the question, what's next? And we have got to do something to deal with the demand for education. I started this business during the time when farm animal welfare, it was just discovered. Prior to about 2000, all discussions of humane animal treatment was pet shelters and pets. About 2000, humane farm animal care, or certified humane came on, and that became a thing, and it grew. And regenerative agriculture now is where animal welfare was in 2000, and it's growing very quickly. We have a lot of people that want to learn what we do. So we're in the process of setting up a nonprofit called the Center for Agricultural Resiliency. And we're developing we've hired a person and developed a protocol for people to come here and learn. These are people that don't have 3 months to be an intern, but do have a week to come and learn. So that's going to be a growing part of our business for the next year or two.
Well, really, I was going to say what you're doing with the visits and the internships, that is education, and you're just leveraging that further. So instead of the, short-term product, if you will, of a visit and the long-term product of a 3-month internship, now you've got seminars and weekly, that type of an experience that a person, so you can meet them at the level that they want to be met at. And I think that's an amazing legacy that you're going to leave.
You described that.
All those people.
Yeah, you just described that very well in terms of it's a different educational product for a different person. Yep.
So the future is going to be helping to support this. It's going to be bringing the cattle that you need back to your own land by expanding land and doing more of what you're doing, but essentially helping others know about it and training up the army of people it's going to take to switch from a conventional chemical-based agricultural system to a regenerative, biologically based agricultural system. It's going to take a wholesale brain transplant. And we think you are a brain surgeon, Will. You didn't know it. You're working on brains every day.
that would surprise a lot of my teachers from, if any of them were still alive, they'd be very surprised at that, but they're not. So good.
I'm sorry. I like to joke around a little bit. So that's exciting. I like your view for tomorrow. And you know what? It's great to have those things, but it's hard to have everything written down. I'm with you. I kind of go with what the flow is, what Mother Nature throws at us, and how everything comes together. But you mentioned a number in that. You said 180 team members now, and that probably doesn't include your interns and those kind of things. Before you got into this, and let's say you were still doing it right, what everybody else would say with your animal science degree, we got them in feedlots, we're feeding them TMR, we've got the antibiotics going on, we got all the things you're supposed to do happening. How many people did it take you to raise, let's just say 1,000 finishers then, compared to, what you're doing today? Describe that difference in the, first off, rural revival, because we have more jobs, but the more people it takes to do what you do. Talk about how that's changed from yesterday to today.
Well, we wouldn't have 3 or 4 employees. They would be sort of minimum wage-ish employees, maybe a lead guy. And I was the only decision maker on the farm. And it was, we had about 600 mama cows, and I had a feedlot. I was feeding grain in a feedlot back then. And then, fast forward today is 180 something. Payroll here is over $100,000 a week in one of the poorest counties in the state. So that the economic impact is very obvious. It's very apparent, and we're proud of that. I should tell you that the 3 basic tenets of White Oak Pastures are compassionate animal welfare, regenerative land management, and this rural revival. The first 2, the management of the animals and the land, was very, very intentional. Didn't like it, studied it, made up my mind what to do different, implemented it. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, re-implemented what didn't. Very, very intentional. And it worked very well over time. Not overnight, but over time. The third tenet, which is the rural revival, was absolutely unintentional. I was never public spirited enough or smart enough or thought that we would have enough impact to really change the town. But it has. And I'm very proud that Bluffton, Georgia, that's the name of our town. And we still don't have about 100. We got 180 employees in a town with 103 people. So try that sometime. See how you like it. But the town has gone from being literally a dying little ghost town to being kind of a little destination. I mean, still a little, but people come here and come here to live. They come here to eat, to visit, to sleep. So it's very unintentional, but very, very much something we're proud of.
Well, a lot of times we realize there's a lot of unintended consequences or negatives to what we do. And what I like to talk about, what you're mentioning right there, is I call it unintended benefits, where you didn't dream that, but it just kind of happens. And we're just getting started on our own on-farm enterprise. But in typical corn, soybean country, it takes 1 person per 700 to 1,000 acres to work. So our farm, we had 3 people working. But now that we've added the livestock enterprise, we have, 3 more full-time people working, and we have basically a full-time person and a half working at the marketing business. So, we have 2.5 times on the same acre base, just because we're creating more value and we're keeping that value in the community instead of sending it to Brazil through JBS or sending it to, some other Walmart or Amazon, because we're doing those things. We're creating that value and we're getting it to the customer. And it's just, I'm looking forward to being at 180 someday. You'll be at 10,000 by then, but
No,
we'll get there.
I bet we won't. There's a limit to it. We say that what we do is highly replicatable, but it's not highly scalable. In terms of scale, we're probably about big as we need to be. I mean, growth is not, there's 7 of us that run the company. Me, 2 children, 2 in-laws, and 2 non-family members. And we meet here in this building, this little, my office, it was actually an old 1-room courthouse. We meet here every Wednesday at 1:30, and we talk about what we run the company. And it's interesting to me that we never talk about growth. We've had a lot of growth, but that hasn't been a thrust. We never talk about profitability. We talk about how much money we got in the bank or how much we ain't got in the bank, what we need. Everything we talk about is based on what needs doing for the land and the animals and the community. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not anti-profit. We intend to make a profit, but profit is not the driver for everything we do. Cash flow is a hell of a driver for what we do. It has a great impact on what we do and what we don't do. But I compare and contrast that in my mind to a stock company, publicly traded company, where they're obligated. The people who run the company are obligated to maximize the return of the shareholder. So it's all based on profit. And just how very different that is, and how very different the decisions for a given problem would be coming out of those 2 cultures.
Ultimately, profit is a symptom. It's not the cause. And the cause is having the soil right and having your team right. And profit is what comes out of that. So you're kind of diagnosing the symptom instead of diagnosing the cause. And I like the approach that you're taking there. That's great.
We talk about the abundance that the land produces. If you got all the cycles of nature working optimally, the carbon cycle, water cycle, energy cycle, mineral cycle, microbial cycle, you got all those generators going, there's an abundance that's yielded, and that's what we sell, and that's how we cash flow this business. And your example similarly is spot on, that the next step is to have your organism operating optimally. And that abundance then yields a profit, and the profit goes to pay your bills.
So 3 people, part-time, maybe full-time, minimum wage, you're calling all the shots in the beginning. Now 180, you got 7 decision makers, 2 non-family, 5 that are family, which the 5 family can be more challenging sometimes than the non-family. It just depends. That's just how families work, right? You talk about how you've changed the land over time, and there's some great resources we'll share in the show notes about that. I want to talk about you a little bit, as far as how did you have to essentially regenerate yourself to grow beyond telling 3 people what to do every step of the way to creating this team of 180. How does that work? Because if another farmer's out there thinking, oh, geez, I can't do that. Well, you did it somehow. How do you feel that regeneration, you had to grow as an individual to make this happen. Can you give us some insights there on how that worked?
Well, I think I can. I've never been asked that question specifically, but I'll preface it by saying this. I absolutely have always been and still am a proud C student. I mean, I've never, if the people who went to school with me, or if any of those teachers were living, I was just a C student, and I've never considered myself to be, the smartest person or one of the smartest people in the conversation. I just, I am pretty humble, and I will listen, and I will plagiarize, and I'm a pretty good implementer. I mean, I'm pretty good at pulling the trigger on something. I mean, I don't have to study it endlessly. Just, ready, aim, fire. I was ready to aim, fire, and making changes. Every time I fired, I'd make another change, try to get it where it worked. And I think that a lot of people I've seen that hadn't worked are people that were so smart and so analytical and so driven to want to know the how and the details that they miss their opportunity to pull the trigger. I did not know how to borrow money. I did not know. I took the very minimum. I know finance when I was in college. My dad had never borrowed a penny. He was a child of the Depression and was very debt adverse, completely debt adverse. Took the very minimum accounting I had to take. I don't think it was even called accounting. I think it was called bookkeeping back then. And made them a C, and it was fine. It just had to figure it out as I went. Again, humble enough to say I don't understand that. You hit me a little bit here. The evolution was very hard. Going from being the only decision maker. I probably had 40, 50 employees before I really added any layers to that process. Today, it's very layered. I mean, the 7 directors supervise 26, I think, managers that supervise the 100 and whatever employees that we got left out there. And that added to the quality of my life more than anything else. There's a lot of decisions I don't have anything to do with. We call it peeing on it. And I don't have to pee on it. We just go with it.
Doesn't have to be yours. There you go.
We don't have to. We make a lot of mistakes, and we don't ever point fingers. We consider it to be honorable to say, I made a mistake here. I screwed this up. We got to fix it. To be the one to say, I made a mistake, not to be the guy that says you made the mistake.
Yep. So eliminating that culture of blame, or that culture of it's okay, it's not okay to fail. Okay. So if you can fail and you can accept a mistake, I mean, that's a huge way to learn more and learn new. Yeah. And, there's some people celebrate it. I mean, oftentimes I learn more when I screw up than when I get everything right, because I know what I definitely don't want to do again. So
if a person makes a mistake here, we're going to talk about it till they understood they made a mistake. As soon as they understand they made a mistake and acknowledge it, we're not going to talk about that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So a lot of personal growth had to go into this journey. And I thought it was also interesting too, how you said when you added more leadership within your organization, how your quality of life became better. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that. The one man captain of the 50-person pirate ship versus now we've got, a team underneath of you and different responsibility areas. How does that feel different? How did that process come into place for you?
Well, I tell these young managers that we hire that if you can't get things done through others, your business will never get any bigger than you are. And we really focus on being sure that people, managers understand they are running a business. That's their business. We're going to help you, and we're going to provide resources, and we're going to provide backup, but it's your business. And if you can run it and grow it and find other people to help you run and grow it, it can grow. You can do, and we believe in compensation contribution. If all you doing is standing there with a water hose, squirting water on the grass, that's not much of a contribution, and you don't get paid too much. If you're able to get that done with somebody else, and also somebody's on the lawnmower, and also somebody's picking up pecans, and also somebody, and you able to make that work, then your contribution went up, so you're going to be compensated by it. And keeping people equitably compensated is something that requires a lot of focus. We're here, everybody is so diverse. We have people cutting meat, people moving hogs, people feeding chickens, people at the store. It's just so different. It's hard for us. It requires a lot of focus to keep compensation equitable with what they're producing.
Well, I think we get a chance to work with a lot of large farmers that maybe are doing commodity crops or they're doing specialty crops, but essentially they're selling it to a third party who's selling it to that there's a process to it that, it's 4 or 5, it's a conventional ag paradigm. When they look at or think about the extra people it would take to produce the product into something that people, like you said, from cattle to beef, we quit selling cattle, we're selling beef now. And all those steps that it takes, it's a little bit overwhelming for other people. So, but I think there's a tremendous amount of value. Instead of giving away 87% of every dollar, if we can keep that, there's opportunity there. So,
you raise a good point. We humans, we want to silo things. We want to silo knowledge. If you're a plant pathologist, you want to know everything there is to know about plant disease, and probably don't know much about anything else. And that's certainly true with knowledge, but it's also true with functionality. If you're a farmer, understandably, you want to farm. And if somebody else says, "Well, I'll take it and process it for you," that's what you want to hear. And if somebody else says, "Well, I will market it for you," and somebody says, "I'll distribute it for you," these are things you want to hear because it allows you to do what you're good at. But remember, those people aren't doing it to help you. They're doing it, and there's nothing wrong with it. They're doing it to profit.
Right.
So if you were growing it, processing it, marketing it, distributing it, you get 100 cents out of every dollar. You'd have to spend some of it for the processing and all that. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, you mentioned, I think, 14 cents. Isn't that right?
I think that's the last they said, 13, 14 cents every dollar.
And basically what you've done is bought a lot of convenience. Because it's a lot better to load them on the truck and haul them to the auction barn and pick up the check tomorrow. I mean, there's a lot of avoided angst in doing it that way, but it comes at a price.
Right. And there's a cash flow aspect to it too, because I think about when we put our bulls out in August, okay, we're not going to get that beef into our freezer until 3 years from then. Mm-hmm. And then we may take up to 6 months or 12 months to cash flow that back out. And we've paid the processor, $1,000 per animal in our case to do that. So, I mean, there's, that's a big negative cash flow to get started on. And I think that's pretty scary for some people. But what I want farmers to hear is it can be done, and you can change. You can become a leader of a larger organization to capture that value instead of just giving it away to somewhere else. And I think that's a great thing that you've done to grow past that 2 or 3 people in order to accomplish that.
Hey, let me say, yes, that's true. But let me say one more thing. I'm not an evangelist. I'm not trying to get people to change what they do, and so it's incumbent that I bring this up. Let's take what I do versus what my friends and neighbors and relatives do here. Both of them are very capital intensive. What I do and what they do in the commodity industrial centralized market, both of them capital intensive. Both of them are fairly low margins. Now, my margins are higher, but I take I put a lot more into it. But the risk in what I do is so much greater than the risk in what they do. And I'm not saying that conventional farming is not risky. No, I'm not saying that. But there's so many tools, from hedging to crop insurance to the number of, we can go into it, as good as I do. Their tools are not available to me. So before we brag too much on my business model, I should acknowledge that, I think probably the risk to reward ratio is worse in what I do than it is in what they do, which is why one of the reasons why a lot of people aren't streaming into this. I was an animal science graduate, and I heard them talking about the risk reward ratio. I didn't know what it was, but I do now. And there's a lot of risk for a modest amount of reward when we make these transitions. That's just an acknowledgement of what's true.
Well, I always appreciate your wisdom. I get your newsletter and I read your blog, and those are definitely wise words to live by. You're not doing this because you want to get rich quick. I don't know of anything in farming that's that way. You're doing this because you want to enable yourself to do farming in a different way.
The newsletter you get that I wrote has been cleaned up a right good bit from what I wrote it. It's been
well, I know if it's in all caps, it's the real deal.
Yeah, they've taken some expletives out of there, probably some examples like this.
Well, that's okay. We all need helpers, right? So tell us a little bit about opportunities here to visualize what all you got going on. You mentioned a little bit the opportunity to visit your farm. Share that with folks a little bit, how they can get online, connect with you, come see what you're up to, and just get an idea how agriculture can be done differently.
Well, we got a website. It's whiteoakpastures.com. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. I think when you go on that, it invites you to sign up for it, and you can if you want to. We do have cabins that you can, and some houses that you can rent for a day or a weekend, a week or whatever. There's also some, we do some schools. We just started that. We're going to do more of it. I think the two men I respect most in the regenerative agriculture space are Spencer Smith from Nevada and Gabe Brown from North Dakota. And Spence was here about 3 weeks ago, and Gabe will be here in about 2 weeks. And we pay the expenses to get them here and charge folks to come and listen to them. We don't do a lot of that. We're going to do more of it. We do some things internally here, schools and things, from cutting meat to hog production, cattle production, sheep production, pasture poultry production. And we serve 3 meals a day, 7 days a week.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to coming down there. My wife and I were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, and we planned to come down last year, but craziness hit. So hoping to get down there in September or something in between our world famous concert with the cows in August and the beginning of harvest. So we hope to come down there and see what you've got going on. It sounds really amazing. And I think it's a great way for people to visualize when you can see things with your own eyes. I think as farmers, if we could get out away from our farms more and interact with more people, see more things happening, I think it makes it easier to envision making a change on our own farm. Because, like you said, with the way you wanted to raise animals, it wasn't conducive to sell them wholesale. So you had to capture that profit. Well, then that requires this. So essentially you said, this is what I want to do because this is the right thing to do. And gosh darn it, we're going to make it happen. And I think that's pretty amazing what you've done there.
Well, and what you said about this and others, I never had an original thought in my life. Everything I've ever done came from seeing what somebody else did and liking it and coming home and plagiarizing it, or thinking, I don't want to do that. So that's been a great help.
That's awesome.
Anytime we mentioned briefly greenwashing, and we agree that's too long the topic to get into. But I will say this, that it's incumbent for people like me to fight greenwashing. When they do that, they devalue what I do. Mm-hmm. So I got to stand up and tell the story, and I do. And the only, those people, those multi-billion-dollar multinational companies have got such talented people to do that greenwashing, and we don't have them. But the shield and sword that we have are authenticity and transparency. And the tourism, if that's what you want to call it, business we got, allows us to put what we do on open demonstration. And that's good for our business. All our customers all over the country, a small percentage of them are really going to come here and look. But 100% of them know they could come here and look because they know that a percentage is coming here and looking. And that's powerful. And that is, again, that's the sword and the shield.
And I think what you did with General Mills and to quantify what you've got going on there is excellent. We'll have that study in the show notes and your blog article on that. And I think that's one way to have the transparency on a mathematical basis, right? You got to have the proof, but ultimately it's on an emotional basis. People have to be able to connect and see and believe. But there's a quote that sticks in my head a lot that a very wise person once told me. He said, there's only 3 things in this world that you cannot hide. And I'm going to let that wise person finish this. One is the sun, one is the moon, and
the truth.
The truth. Eventually, you will see all 3. Mm-hmm. So I remember you saying that, and that's true. And
you can't hide it.
And that's how we have to approach this, 4 pounds of meat is all you can have idea. It's just, give me a break. Switching everybody over to soybean oxalates and all this other engineered food or lab meat, and you can only have 4 pounds. I mean, we need to be having regenerative raised meat that is sequestering carbon, making our lives better, instead of creating some sort of lab thing and all the unintended consequences. So,
I'm not one of the livestock people that rails against being a vegetarian or vegan. If somebody tells me that they are vegetarian or vegan because they just can't bear to eat something that was a living animal, I respect that. It's not my view, it's not my worldview, but I respect it. Mm-hmm. They tell me they are vegetarian or vegan because they just don't like the way it feels in the mouth, or it makes them feel bad. I respect all that. That's fine. It's a lifestyle choice. You make it. I support you. But now you can't tell me you're doing it for the environment. That ain't okay. It's not. I won't stand for it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with people if they want to have that choice for whatever reason, they can have that choice. But then all of a sudden, when we get, the government regulating what we can do, I think that's a whole nother can of worms there. So it's some wild times we live in, and a lot more fun to come, right?
I think so.
Well, Will, I certainly appreciate your time today. I wish you continued success in what you've got going on there in Bluffton, and just a amazing story. It has you've been in. It's taken years to be an overnight success, right? And just one step forward in the right direction all the time is all it takes. And then 20, 30, 40 years later, you're an overnight success. So it's pretty amazing to see what you got going on there. And if you ever find your way up in the land of Lincoln here, you're certainly welcome to stop by. We'd love to host you. So
thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today, and I hope you will come see us.
I will. We'll be down there this summer.
Good.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to head to Bluffton, Georgia, where it sounds like they're always fixing for company. Will and the team at White Oak Pastures illustrates what it looks like to operate with authenticity and transparency, and you can tell from the conversation that they love what they do. On their website, you'll see a tagline that says, "In soil we trust." Pretty sure that shows how they feel about building soil health. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing to help growers to implement soil health practices, check out our website at asn.farm. And there you can click on the links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.